In reality, the bourgeoisie has only one method of solving the housing question after its fashion. That is to say, of solving it in such a way that the solution perpetually renews the questions anew. The breeding places of disease, the infamous holes and cellars in which the capitalist mode of production confines our workers night after night, are not abolished. They are merely shifted elsewhere. The same economic necessity that produced them in the first place produces them in the next place. Engels, The Housing Question, 1872. Can't afford rent, getting gentrified. Marx in the house, about to tell you why. What up, y'all? Welcome to Marx in the House. This is a show where we examine gentrification through a Marxist lens. The reason why we started off the show with a long-ass quote from one of the most underrated Marxists ever is to show how little dominant themes under capitalism change. Yes, the particularities of capitalism change as time goes on, but the universal laws, like shitty housing for the working class, remain an inherent part of this evil system. Engels here talks about how the bourgeoisie never solves problems of the working class, but just spreads them around. And today we're gonna take a look at displacement specifically. Our starting point? The womb that produced babies and went on to produce other babies. If these babies would be metaphors for music and not actual babies, I'm talking about New Orleans. Aside from bomb-ass music, New Orleans is of course known for being devastated during Hurricane Katrina. What people might not know is that the eye of the hurricane actually had missed New Orleans. By the time it got there, it was already a Category 1 hurricane, which is as weak as they come. So it wasn't necessarily the hurricane that fucked up the working class colonized neighborhoods, but government actions. This is important to keep in mind as we look at all the shady fucking shit that's about to follow. So the city lost more than half its entire population. That's 254,000 motherfucking people. New Orleans used to be 67% black, now it's 60%. That change might not seem like much, but there's about 100,000 black people missing from New Orleans. So how did the then Governor Kathleen Blanco respond to this tragedy? Quote, "It took the storm of a lifetime to create the opportunity of a lifetime. We must not let it pass us by." And that was just a couple of weeks after. Sounds like motherfuckers have been waiting for it. So how was this opportunity used? Let's get into a little shock doctrine. Politicians and developers were able to ram through laws much easier and quicker than under other circumstances. They privatized schools and housing, busted unions, and gave major companies tax breaks. Pretty much anybody with guap willing to invest could do so with barely any strings attached. The lower Ninth Ward was hit the hardest, which, shocker shocker, has always been a symbol for black culture. In the 1920s, the government had built a canal down the center of it. During Katrina, they blew up the concrete barriers holding water back from the industrial canal. This alone destroyed most homes and killed 1,000 people. Whenever the government relocates people after a disaster, there's no guarantee for you to be placed in your hometown. And surprise, surprise, most black people who requested with the relocating agency to be housed back in New Orleans were denied. The people who did get placed in New Orleans found average rent raised from 14% of their income to 35% of their income. But of course, that's not the end of it. A lot of properties were seized and auctioned off by the city. If a crib is considered blighted, which can mean it just needs a paint job or there's overgrown grass, the city imposes crazy fines which can be thousands of bucks a month. Most people could only partially afford to fix up their houses or pay the fines. And at that point, you have 2 months before the city takes your shit. So even if you own a house under capitalism, your shit is never safe. What we can learn from New Orleans is that the bourgeoisie will use any and all opportunity to displace working class people. But I want to zoom out a bit and look at displacement from a broader lens. As my boy Marcuse, no, not the real one, the other one, said, displacement is so much more than the moment of being kicked the fuck out of your crib. The first is direct last resident displacement. Now this is the most obvious one. For example, a landlord cuts off the heat in a building and forces you to move out. Or they increase your rent and you have no option but to move out. The second is direct chain displacement. This looks at people in a neighborhood who have moved out early in the gentrifying process. Remember, as landlords withhold repairs, buildings slowly start going to shit. As the neighborhood spirals down, not everyone leaves at the end of the spiral. Rent also increases portion by portion, and for some, the first bump might already be too much. The third is exclusionary displacement. If I move out for a reason unrelated to gentrification, chances are that the person moving in will kinda be in my income bracket, right? But if I move out because of gentrification, the landlord will only accept people who are bougier than me. If you spread out this process to a whole neighborhood, then there are a lot of families who are excluded from many places to live in. And that barrier is a form of displacement too. The fourth is displacement pressure. This refers to that constant state of anxiety and dread you feel knowing you can be kicked out of your crib at any second. You see a hip tattoo parlor opening up, and your neighbor across can't afford rent anymore. Are you next? How much longer will you be able to afford your place? Where will you raise your family? This constant, nagging existential crisis is something most working class people face nowadays as the world is gentrifying. And that's a type of violence as well. Remember, gentrification is class warfare, and landlords will do anything to get people out. In East Harlem, a London-based property and financial services company harassed tenants they couldn't kick out easily. The company shut off power and heat, charged for basic repairs, and allowed rats and vermin to spread, all to evict longtime rent-regulated residents. The official numbers show around 1 million evictions a year in the US, but you know how iffy official numbers can get. I mean, in New York City alone, housing courts sometimes handle around 350,000 cases a year. In the UK, evictions have increased by nearly 50% over the past 4 years. And in a whole lot of cases, eviction directly leads to houselessness. In the meantime, we got more empty cribs and houseless people. We keep coming back to the refrain of episode 1. Shit makes no sense. If you enjoy Marks in the House, please consider donating to my Patreon and or sharing this video with friends and comrades. It's my goal to make a lot more video series analyzing art, history, and politics through a Marxist lens. If you enjoyed this video, you'll enjoy the other ones that magically popped up on the screen. And look up Space Baby on Spotify to check out my music. Peace, love, and solidarity. Space Baby out.